Hello everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. This Q&A will be focused on your questions specifically around the Tombs of Amascut rewards on offer. Today I have some very special guests. I have Mod Arcane, Mod Husky, and Mod Sween. How are we doing? I'll start with you, Arcane.
Doing pretty good. Been playing Group Ironman for the past week or so. Finally finished my fishing grind, and now I'm at Sand Crabs for the foreseeable future. Of course.
Nice. What's the group's plan of action? What's the first thing you guys are going to take on as a collective?
Our first proper goal that we all want to accomplish together is killing Krill. So God Wars Dungeon. So we're kind of focusing all of our plans and strategies around how do we get to that, and what's the minimum gear we want, minimum stats, etc., etc. I'm really just trying to get to that as fast as possible.
Awesome. Husky, how are you doing? I'm sure, maybe you're in the same vein as the rest of us, playing a lot of Group Ironman.
Yeah, I'm good. I haven't been playing as much as some, but a bit on the side. A couple of people in my group are pushing way further ahead, and I've just been doing some Temporos, and I've got 1k permits and closing in on 81 fishing to get the most out of them and give some food to people. And then I think long term, it's they'd kind of like me to do Gauntlet and try get some Bofas for everyone. So yeah, that kind of thing. I like the Gauntlet, so I don't mind going and doing that grind, but that's still so far off.
Yeah, just go do 2,000 Cryptic Gauntlet, dude. Get everyone Bofas. Easy.
Only 1,600. There's only 4 of us.
Oh man.
just do the rest for the sake of it, you know. Nice round 2k. And Sween, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. Yesterday evening and this morning was emotional with the reaction to my leaving post. So thank you for the very heartfelt message, everybody. It made me sadder than I was. I'm also playing quite a lot of Group of Iron Man, representing the friendly gamer gang with mods Aiza, Archie, and Cam. Our goal at the moment is just to get Archie playing properly. He's adamant he doesn't want to play properly. He's like, I'm just going to AFK fish for you. I'm like, dude, we don't need your lobbies or swordfish. We're going to get a better fish than that in 2 seconds. Just play properly or we're going to kick you to dead weight. I'm glad we didn't make a hardcore team either. He's died 4 times doing nothing. Outside of that, I'm just kind of busy getting stuff done before I go. And I'm going to try and dig out time to reply to everybody on the Twitter thread and the Reddit thread as well. This stream appearance, today, is going to be a really brief one. But I will be on a longer stream next week to say my proper farewells. But much love, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, chat's been popping off since we started with a lot of Sween, sad faces or broken hearts. So yeah, it's probably going to be quite an emotional one next week, I imagine. Cool. Okay, but today is going to be largely focused, as mentioned, on the TOA rewards that we've just released a blog about. So if you haven't checked out the blog, please do. There is another blog coming to you tomorrow with some details on the rewards you could be getting from Nex. On October 20th, we are planning to let you test them all out. That's Nex and TOA rewards. So there are loads of opportunities to give us your feedbacks and thoughts. So without further ado, let's go through some announcements. Group Ironman. Group Ironman has now launched and it's in its 2nd week. We've made some initial hotfixes and we're also working on some further improvements following your feedback. Find out what we're doing with regards to group storage space, saving from group storage, the group chat channel, and more. We're even exploring the possibility of a shared haul, looking at what work would be involved. So get more on this in our game update news post. And raids free rewards. As mentioned, the Tombs of Amascut is Old School's 3rd raid. In this, our latest blog, we've updated and made some changes to the rewards following your feedback. You also get to try them out yourself in the beta, coming on October 20th, so let us know what you think of the changes. And finally, next, we will have some more details about the rewards you can expect from Nex tomorrow. So hang tight until we release a blog on Friday. The rewards will from Nex will be available to try yourself, as mentioned in the beta. So yes, that is the announcements out of the way. And just to preface this Q&A, we'd like to focus on some more general topics of conversation about Tombs and Mascots while we work through your feedback. We understand you guys have a lot of opinions about the rewards. We do see you and we hear you, and we'll have more to share once we've worked through that feedback. We'd like to remind you all again, there is a beta happening on the 20th, so make sure you're around on that game update, where you'll be able to test these items out with existing items in game. So you'll be able to, I don't think there's any limit to what you can test them out on. You'll be able to try whatever you like them. And we want to hear from you when you do. So, after that, we'll be in a great place to know what changes we can make. So please do let us know more on the 20th. And with that being said, I'm going to hand over to Mod Sween for an update on the Dead Man rerun.
Yeah, thank you, Sarnie. I'll be up front to the point, like, at the moment we don't have any concrete information to share, and a bit more context behind that, right? As far as like the decision making goes and the viability of the rerun, that's kind of out of our team. Like, we're the old school team, it's kind of out of our hands. We're waiting on people to go and get information for us, and then once that's done, then we can actually look at communicating something a bit more concrete. That's where we are at that point. But we said we'd offer an update today, so that's what I'm trying to do. What we can share, this is what I've kind of been trying to find out, is just, again, reiterate that we are still committed to trying to do what's right by everyone affected in the Deadman finals. Our OSS team are working with the analytics team to see what can be done for the event. Since the event, so it's almost a month ago now, and then since the event, even during and then immediately afterwards, our OSS team made quite a lot of changes to deter the network attacks. Some were successful, but since then we've seen even more network attacks. And again, more changes and more fixes are being put into place. Now, what we have also discussed is, if a rerun in the same format isn't possible or viable just because of the risks, then we're also not ruling out changing the format of the event either. Now, this is all just another long way of me saying we don't know yet what's going to happen, but we're still working on it. A rerun of some form is still something we really want to do. We appreciate that the event was like greatly flawed because of what happened, and we want to make that right. Now, I've also got just a little bit more I want to talk about PvP related. Obviously, a long time ago now, we blogged things like wilderness changes and fixes, and players are really hungry for a release date and more context and more information there. So we've got lots of various jobs, like as part of this update, that are all being worked on. But there isn't a fixed release date for them. And what we're talking about now is, do we stagger them or bundle them together? Current thinking is that we bundle them together because they're so entwined and interrelated and they affect one another. What you'll see with like various qual polls is, we'll eke out the releases as and when they're ready. Here's a bit, drip feed. But we think doing that here will kind of weaken the proposition of the update. So we're more inclined to save them for a bigger, all-at-once type release. Now, again, this isn't fixed. We'll endeavor to get that release date for you. That is the update I've got to share on the Deadman and the PvP changes. Sorry if I'm a bit out of breath. I've got like a horrible cold at the moment. And I am going to shoot because I do have another meeting to jump into. But I think before I wanted to jump out, and again, I'll be on stream again next week. Just to kind of reiterate that, like what Sarnie said earlier, and what I'm sure Arcan and Husky are going to talk about shortly, is that tons of feedback with the raid rewards. This is what this kind of like blogging stage is for. Give us loads of feedback, but give us time and be patient with it. Hasn't been polled yet. We'll poll it when it's ready. Some people are saying it's underwhelming. Some people say I want to see different effects, different changes, different tweaks. Just give us time to work through it. Like, you might be disappointed now. We've got a beta next week. So yeah, appreciate the patience. Keep giving us feedback. Keep doing great stuff. And hear out Arcane, hear out Husky. This content's going to be sweet and the rewards going to be great.
Awesome. Thank you, Sween. Yeah, hopefully you can return next week and the camera will be working again this time.
Is it not working?
Yeah.
I don't have any I don't have Twitch or vMix open.
It was frozen for the majority of the thing, which might have
Oh, no.
hindered what you were saying. But I didn't want to stop you in your because you know
I couldn't
update
fix
was
it
needed.
anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, well, thank you anyway. It's been nice having one I think one last stream with you. I imagine be the last one together.
I'll jump on as many next week as I'm able to. Get a last little bit of a FaceTime. Well, if my camera moves, that is.
Awesome, good to hear. Well, yeah, thank you again for coming.
Thanks for having me. Right, I'll catch you all shortly. Have a lovely
Thank
evening,
you.
everybody.
You too.
You too.
See ya.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, again, thank you, Sween, for all of that. Mod Arcane, I think we're going to go through some general topics now. So I've got this first question to ask you. How did you keep power creep in mind when designing these rewards?
So first I'd like to just go on my big ass monologue that I prepared. So there's been a lot of feedback as of like the last 5 hours or something like that. I'm basically just going through all of it. So that's like Twitter, Reddit, Discord, everything. I've been talking to a bunch of players, I've been talking to people in the team, and there's a lot of feedback. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate again, kind of what Alec and Jack were saying, where this isn't the last blog. Like, we'll do as many blogs as we need, right? If we've required 10 blogs, 10 iterations to finally get these rewards to a place that everyone's happy with, we'll do that. That's fine. And like even TOB and Chambers of Zarek had a lot of iterations, entire rewards got scrapped repeatedly, and we're fine doing that. That's okay. I'd like to give a bit of context behind like the design originally, and then like the first blog, and then the feedback of that blog, and then kind of where we are now, because it's been quite a long time, to be honest, from like the first iteration in terms of like what we did, and then like when we presented it to the players, and then we had like a 2-month gap almost between the first blog and the second blog. So going in, we really wanted to create obviously powerful new rewards that are appropriate for a raid. And something that I really wanted to try and accomplish was to try and create some items that felt a bit different. So we have the Mage Offhand, which is effectively just a stat stick. It is a direct upgrade to Arcane Spirit Shield. Very, very simple, very, very powerful. That's all good. I think it's good to have some items that are a bit different, right? So it fills more of a different void. We don't want to just have stat sticks all the time on every single piece of gear, every single reward. You kind of run out of it, and then it's a lot harder to avoid the whole power creep topic, right? Usually, this isn't just niches, but you can have effects that, in this case, for example, Masori, where it is strict power creep in terms of just raw power, but it's obviously got this like hindrance effects with the low life, etc. behind it. So the idea is to create items are a bit different because they generally make people play different. They'll make you think different, where you're like, should I use this armor now? Should I use this armor now? Should I switch to this weapon? Is this appropriate here? And generally, that's just a bit more interesting rather than just going like, okay, I'm ditching my Armadillo and now I've got this new armor set. There's no thought there, really. It's like, okay, I'll grind money, I'll buy it, and now I never look at Armadillo ever again. As well as it doesn't actually change your gameplay at all outside of just you do more damage, you make more money. So generally, I think that idea is pretty good. Like in theory, like conceptually, like we want to have interesting items that make people play different. That's good. On the first iteration of the blog, it felt like people received that really well. They're like, okay, this is really interesting, this is really cool. We've got some items that are just like bigger numbers, and we've got some items that are a bit more different. But generally, some people are like, the Masori's not quite there, so it doesn't feel really worth it. Like, you're very, very, very squishy. You're not getting much more damage out of it. It just didn't feel like the trade-off was really there. There's some feedback about the wand not really feeling powerful enough. People are expecting this like big T-bow, this big scythe, like the really big iconic item in the raid that pretty much drives everyone to do it, right? Like, Chambers of Zarek is absolutely awful GP per hour if you take T-bow out of the equation. Like, T-bow is a thing that's carrying that raid solely. And it feels like every raid really needs that, and it feels like we've not really hit that mark here. And again, that was evident in the previous feedback as well, like regardless of our current iteration. Players also didn't really like the offhand being completely useless without an arcane, very worried about the Pegasian scenario. I don't think it really hit the whole Pegasian scenario as much, just because the issue with Pegasian is that Pegasians are so much more common compared to Ranger builds, right? Like, the balance is just not there at all. These would like the Ward and the Arcane Sigil would both be very, very rare items. And whilst there would be an imbalance there and it eventually like affect each other somewhat, I don't think it nearly have the same effects as Pegasian did on Pegasian boots. And the Khopesh was just weird, right? A lot of people were like, "Oh, why is it a stab weapon? The Khopesh is a slash thing." And we had this like whole like blurb, like Ed came up with this lore, like, why is this Khopesh like more stab orientated because of the blah 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 lore. And we made it work, but again, still the players are like, okay, it still just feels weird. Why is a slash weapon a stab weapon? And we addressed all this. In my eyes, at least that was the goal, right? So Masori, we gave it a higher base defense, increased the level requirement as well to match that. So it went from I think 20 to 30, and got significantly more defense to match the requirement. We added dodge onto it, so it's got 8% dodge with the full effect, which is really significant. So dodge is really powerful. 8% dodge is effectively 8% damage reduction, and Just Assure lays around 15% damage reduction. So that's pretty close to what Just Assure offers in raw damage reduction. But obviously it's only at low life, and the armor's got lower defense, so you're going to be still taking quite a lot more damage, but every now and again you'd be able to fully dodge an attack, which kind of synergizes with the whole, I'm low life and I want to try and not eat too much, because otherwise you'd be eating every time you take like 10-20 damage because you're afraid of dying. We added a helmet as well, since there's some concerns about like, we don't want to be wearing Masori chest and legs, but then like an orbital helmet, that just feels weird. So that was first. We added a helmet as well, and that was appropriate. We made the wand even more powerful. So whilst the blog did just say like one more extra max hit, it's one more max hit on a 2-tick attack speed, so it's quite significant. It is a lot more powerful than the Sang staff in terms of raw DPS. It's like 15 to 20% more DPS. That is big. Like if you're looking at T-Bow and Sai, they were around 20 to 25% more DPS than their counterparts, like the predecessors. So the DPS is there, right? But there is a big problem with the wand in terms of it just doesn't feel powerful enough. It's not cool enough. It doesn't have anything particularly outstanding about it. Like it's got this cool like variable attack speed weapon, and it attacks really fast as well as being able to do these really big hits. So it almost has like pseudo the best of both worlds, but it's still just not quite there. We made the offhand equipable, so the ward, but you didn't need to charge it with the sigil to get some like rudimentary stats. Like the stats aren't there; they're intentionally very bad. But it's just to kind of alleviate the complaints of getting this really rare item and then not being able to do absolutely anything with it until you can afford a sigil or you get the sigil, right? It wasn't intended to make it be like a really good item, because then if it's really good, then there's no point in it using the sigil. The entire point was to tie it to the sigil quite heavily. So we think that's okay. And then we changed the Khopesh to now be a fang. So it's actually a stab weapon. We're just ditching the whole Khopesh thing entirely. We can do Khopeshes later. It doesn't need to come from this piece of content. That was like 2 months ago. And now 2 months go by, Nex has been teased. People start talking about the tier 80 armors, Torva, Pernix, Vertus. Generally, there's been a lot of discussions online about all this. And we have noticed how the player opinions changed compared to the first blog was released and now the second blog's been released, right? There's been a lot of things happening in between there where people have started talking and thinking a bit more about this, and they've kind of changed what they really want, which is completely understandable. So what I think, in my opinion, the blog had issues with. So the current iteration of where we are with the rewards, as well as what the blog did kind of badly. For one, I don't think we really did a very good job in explaining like how powerful these items are. Like we have the wand in there, we've got the formula and stuff, and some big brain nerds will go away and figure it all out, right? But it doesn't do a good job at demonstrating where does this wand actually sit, and is that somewhere I'm happy for it to sit. At the moment, it just looks like this wand that's kind of cool, but I'm happy with my Sang because it heals me, which is fair. We did a bad job on that. Masori still doesn't feel quite right. It's still fairly low defense. The low life threshold is contentious. Maybe we can look into raising it from 40 to 50, although I think this could pull away from the entire concept and maybe just mean it's not worth it. Maybe it needs more offense to make this entire mechanic worth it, but then how much more offense is really justifiable, because it's already quite a lot of strength, and strength scales like Slayer helmets and twisted bows, and you end up hitting like 5 or 6 more max hits, and it gets kind of crazy. Or do we just scrap the entire thing altogether and go with like just Pernix, right? So I'm not actually releasing Pernix since that wouldn't make sense from TOA, but the Pernix equivalent, right? We could literally just have the tier 80 range armor. That's an option if we don't want to go with the low life thing anymore. And obviously, again, do let us know, do play with it, give feedback, etc. But again, that's still a route. The Fang and Khopesh still doesn't have a use case. I think a lot of people quite like this item, but they don't really have a very good like reason to like it. Like, it's cool, and I want to use it, and it's going to feel really good to use. But there isn't anything in the meta right now where it really like, stands out of being like, wow, I really want to get it for this. Like, it's just like, it's not quite there. And this is kind of a problem that I was talking about where, because we've not released a lot of new PVM content recently, we haven't really been able to release bosses that are like weak to X or Y. And it's like, we need to create bosses where the best way of killing them isn't released yet, if that makes sense. We haven't had a lot of opportunity to do that lately, and as you all know. And we want to do that more, and we're very conscious of that going forward, but what I'm trying to do is basically release a solution as well as the problem in the same raid, where I do expect that the Fang would be really good in the raid. But as of right now, it's hard to evaluate that, right? But there was a really good suggestion by, I think, Saybebe, who said we could make it so the Corporeal Beast doesn't have 50% damage reduction versus the Fang. So this would become the new best in slot endgame weapon to kill Corp with, which is really interesting and I think could kind of fit. It does raise a question of like, is it just stab weapons that should be good against Corp? Do we just have like a select few where we're like, yeah, okay, this one's good against Corp? Do we actually have any lore reason? Like, why are spears and halberds good against it? I don't really know. They're just stab weapons in my eyes. I don't think there's really anything there. Maybe we can flesh that out. But just something to think about. I saw some complaints about the mage offhand, and like, it should still be really good without the arcane sigil. Honestly, I feel like the majority of these complaints are Iron Men just not wanting to do Corp, and I think the answer to that is go do Corp. Like, the point is to make you do this other content. We don't want to devalue the arcane sigil. I get you might spend 100, 200 hours getting this ward and then not have a really good item to show for it, but that should just motivate you to do Corp even more. I do think the solution to that, if it is a massive problem, is to look into Corp in terms of we can make some qual changes there. Some items could be better against it in the future, like the Fang, where it makes that grind a little less tedious. There's a lot of complaints about harmonized staff losing relevancy. This is something that we've been saying as well for a while. We don't really have a good plan for it. We have a lot of ideas, but we don't have like a solid plan like this is the future of harm. I don't think the best solution is to just buff the harm to make sure it's always relevant. I think it does what it does. It makes stuff one tick faster on the standard spellbook. It's just that the standard spellbook's kind of shit and it's completely locked into Tome of Fire, which is just not great. I've been thinking a lot about how we could rework the standard spellbook in a lot of different ways, and naturally that would make harmonized staff just better. And I'm not looking at chat, but I assume it's full of gasps right now because I just swore. And then the last point I have is general raids-worthy sentiment. I think after talking to a lot of players and reading a lot of feedback, people generally like these rewards, and that they're cool and they feel good, but they're not 100% sold on it coming from a raid. So a raid's something we don't do very often, and it feels like if we are going to have strict power creep in terms of like, these are just really powerful rewards that shouldn't be as niche-based, it should be a raid. Raids should be the thing that really pushes that boundary. It'd be fine if, like, say, Masori or Masori equivalent in terms of, like, its niche, like, effect activations came from something more akin to Nightmare or, like, a side boss or something like that. But from a raid, I kind of see and I can kind of agree that it's just not the place to have these, like, really niche items. Whilst we, again, still like them, I think players still would enjoy playing with them, it's not necessarily the best place to do it. So we can always just hold off on these rewards and release them later, right? The different theme, different context, different values, etc. So yeah, safe to say we're going to be taking a lot of feedback. Please play the beta and give us feedback because it feels very different. As well as I imagine in the next few days, we're going to get a lot of people like really thinking about it and doing the math, and maybe we'll give you some more information to read upon, right? But please keep up on it, keep giving feedback, play it, give more feedback. There's the next rewards next Wednesday as well, which you've not seen yet, but obviously you'll know about that tomorrow. So that'll be interesting as well, because you'll be comparing like TOA versus Next. It's like, because you'll be able to see if they actually feel appropriate as well, and maybe you'll see the next rewards potentially being used at TOA, etc. Yeah, I think that's over. I think I'm done.
So I can't really add much to that. I mean, I think the only thing I want to say is there's been so many like just comments that are rude here or there, just like, oh, Jagex don't think about things. They just release stuff and they don't listen. And like, man's just rambled 25 minutes about game design, about rewards. You know, it's clearly been thought out a lot. And even if you disagree, like, that's what we're trying to do, right? I completely agree. We don't want to release rewards that people go, this is rubbish. There's no point having this really cool content that you guys have been waiting for a long time if you guys are just not excited to do the rewards, right? So yeah, try the beta, see if they feel any better. Try and give us more specific feedback as well. Like, I've seen stuff about like low life is shit and doesn't belong in the game. That is why. Tell us why. Why do you think low life is rubbish? I mean, like, people love Darox. Darox is a really fun mechanic that a lot of people play around with. Is it just the fact it's a 40 hit point threshold? Do you think it doesn't work with ranged? Do you think that the dodge chance is stupid? Like, okay, well, why do you think it's stupid, right? So, like, just come on, like, engage with us a bit more, like, keep it up. Like, we want to get these right. We want to absolutely have amazing rewards that you guys are looking forward to, right? So, and as Arcane said, if this takes 10 iterations to get what we feel is a strong set of rewards, we'll do it. We're not scared to reiterate on feedback or drop ideas if they're just not working, right?
Yeah, thank you both. That was way better job than I could ever do. I can assure you that. But yeah, just to reiterate the points that both Arcane and Husky have made, like, you know, we've just released the blog. And you're allowed to disagree with us. You're absolutely allowed to disagree with us. Let us know, and you know, try them out on Wednesday, along with the next rewards. You know, and tell us anything and everything you think about these, because yeah, we will keep looking at it and we'll keep looking at your feedback, and you know, we'll go back and revisit until we feel it's right. So yeah, I think you guys again did a much better job than I did. So cool. Should we go on to the general topics then? Have some questions.
Sure.
I think it's about time. Awesome. I think you've mentioned it a couple times in your monologue, and I want that timed. I would like a timestamp of that monologue because it's very impressive.
You out monologued me.
How did you keep power creep in mind when designing these rewards?
I mean, it's generally like, okay, well, if we're introducing range armor, what other range armor do we have? Does this creep on it in any way? Like, the Masori is pretty blatant in terms of it's very low defense, so Armadillo keeps that like high defense. Like, I don't want to really play risky role, and then Masori would come in being the, okay, I really care about DPS, or I want to put in extra effort, or this content isn't overly risky, or deals a lot of damage, so then Masori would fill that. So yeah, there was a lot of, okay, can I introduce items into the game without unnecessarily devaluing other items? Because we don't want to devalue stuff. Devaluing stuff is bad. Sometimes it's necessary when appropriate, and hopefully you can do things to mitigate it in certain ways. But it's bad to just mindlessly power creep stuff for like no benefit. Like, just giving people 2 extra strength here and there without any thought about it, it's not great. It is really just that, just knowing all the rewards and how people use them, where the demand is, etc.
Yeah, and I think, like, I remember you had this, I don't know if you said this on a live stream yet, or like you had the discussion internally, but like, I think the topic of Torva came up a lot with regards to Nyx, right? And, oh, let's look at the stats of Torva, right? Like, even ignoring the bonus hit points and stuff from RuneScape, right? You're like, okay, well, it's way tankier than Bandos. Okay, so is it like, basically like Justiciar, right? But with more strength than Bandos, and then is Justiciar irrelevant? And then, okay, well, we've got the Inquisitor set, which has like this really high damage with crush weapons, and is this just replace Inquisitor, right? Now, it could be like we just need to take that step into the next tier, right? I think we've seen more than enough comments of players kind of suggesting that we should. I don't know if that would actually come down to like that's what we should do and most players should do it. And I personally think that that's going to come up eventually. Is the time now? It could be. But like maybe it's okay to go to this like tier up and just say this was the playground of like tier 70 to 75 that we've been in, and we're now moving into 80 to 85, right? I mean, the game's been out for long enough, but that also has other issues that, like, I'm sure, like, I'd love to see a discussion like this happen, right? But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, making content irrelevant is something that we really just don't want to do, right? If there's never a reason to go to Bandos and stuff, like, for example, that's a bad thing. So then you say, okay, we just make it require a Bandos, and that does it. But that only works for so many things, right? I mean, I think you did say this on a live stream once. Another attachment to primordials might just feel really weird, right? Because you got dragon boots and an attachment to primordials, another attachment, then we'd release another thing and there's another attachment, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Sometimes
that's what we
it's
want to
good
do.
and appropriate.
And I think that that's something that, like, you can look at, like, games like, I think World of Warcraft's the biggest example of, like, it's an expansion-based game that makes all its previous content irrelevant, basically, right? Every 2 years. That's something that we don't do a lot, and people are starting Group Iron Man on journeys, and there's a reason to almost do every piece of content still in our game for these people on these journeys. Or someone starting out can, like, go to combat achievements and, like, do bosses, and there's reasons to go and do stuff still. So I think that's something I'd like to preserve, but I'm not going to preserve that to the extent of never having power creep. I just think there's a right way to do it and stuff, you know?
I agree.
Thank you, guys. What inspiration did you take when designing these rewards?
I know. I think I mentioned once with the Masori armor, the low life set effects is from I got inspiration from a game called Path of Exile because they have a lot of effects that are based on low life. Obviously, very, very different game, but the inspiration and the idea is still there, right? The variable attack speed wand, I think it's just been an idea that's been thrown around internally quite a lot. I think Husky talked about it quite a while ago, and then it's just kind of floated around and then eventually just pushed it. I don't think the other ones are particularly very inspired. It's a ring that gives more energy, and it's an offhand that gives more stats. There's not much there.
I mean, the Siren's Tome was literally the inspiration for that, right? Which was very flawed in design and yet passed a poll. And there were a lot of players just saying an attachment to the arcade would make this really cool. So that just feels like something that is directly something the community asked for. And I think I haven't seen any negatives about it other than the current proposal, like the stats being too low, right? For the one that hasn't had the arcane attached to it, right?
I mean, speaking of low life, where do you think that effect is going to be the most useful?
Yeah, so I was talking to a bunch of people on Discord about this because in their eyes, this 40% threshold just makes it useless at anything that they care about. And yeah, if you're looking at like the biggest and scariest content like Inferno, Challenge Mode Chambers, everything just hits so hard that you're either going to be having to ticky constantly or just risking it, which is not good gameplay. And in my mind, that's okay if there's certain pieces of content that it's just not worth it. And just because you've got the armor equipped doesn't mean you have to be low life. So like we buffed the accuracy of Masori to be the same as Armadillo, so at least you're not getting penalized offensively by equipping the armor set anymore. So it's the same as Armadillo, it's just worse defense. So because of that, that meant, for example, if you're looking at Chambers of Xeric, like if you're doing the Mystics room, they generally don't hit that high, and if they do, they're not attacking you very often. You can avoid a lot of damage in that room. Valzer as well. There's a lot of rooms where you can avoid most of the damage, but there's like rooms such as Musadal, which he just spits at you, and then you'll take like 60 damage. And that's obviously really frustrating. You just don't have to be low life for that room. Like you could safe up for that room and then just not benefit from the offensive bonuses and then use it for the rest of the raid, etc. So in my mind, there was a lot of use cases for it, but I can understand with the opinion of this is an end game raid. It's the latest raid. It's hopefully the hardest raid, and it's going to be a really expensive armor set. And I can't even do Chambers of Xeric and wear my new armor set everywhere. I think that's a completely fair frustration to have. Like this end game armor set that I just can't use everywhere. Like why do I still use this 8-year-old God Wars item at Ulm when I have this like 1 bill armor set that I can use? That just feels weird and it feels wrong. So it's hard to align all these and make everyone happy in all those scenarios because they're all completely fair complaints. But yeah, we're just gonna have to think about it more.
I think CM's the outlier for a lot of the use cases against it as well, right? Like a CM, I think we've all kind of said it, it's pretty terrible in that it just says, we're going to increase the damage. And I think that I was speaking a lot to Kieran about this back before original Nightmare launch, right? And I think Nightmare hit way harder for a lot of its just standard mechanics early on in testing. And I think it was he said that like there's a point where like damage really shouldn't be above a certain point unless it's completely avoidable, right? So like if something's hitting you for a 60 and you can't avoid that, that feels like bad game design, right? To just expect the player to have to take 60 damage out of 99 hit points. But there's probably a point where like 35 to 40 is okay, right? So that was the point where, like, to me, the Missouri armor works if you can take all the unavoidable damage and you're never really going to die. Like, as long as you could have prayed against it, as long as you could have done something, you're not going to die about the sub 40 unless you actually do something like take a wrong step, right? You know, things like nightmares, like when you stand on the black, like pools and hands come out. If that thing hit like 70 or 80, that feels fine because there was like a warning, right? For example, compared to just her, you know, an unavoidable part of the damage. So I think that that's the sweet spot it needs to lie, and I completely get that, like, people have said increase it to 50, and I think there's a really fine threshold where, like, it just doesn't become meaningful, right? And maybe Chambers of Xeric CM would just be a place you just never use this armor because of the stupidness of, like, big mutadial, or maybe you just don't use it in certain rooms, right? And I think Alm's max hit is, like, up there as well, isn't it? So... And by the way, none of these numbers, like, for, like, getting one shot and stuff, like, some fights have combo, like, mechanics and stuff, right? You know, like, Alm has a burn attack that's an extra 5 that could just sync up with it, right? So it really does feel like there's a fine line for that threshold to work.
Cool, thank you guys. Were there any other ideas you explored outside of the blog, like rewards and etc.?
Bloods. Yeah. When I was just coming up with them, I had just had a spreadsheet of loads of rewards ideas, and the hard part was not coming up with rewards, but we're coming up with rewards that either felt right for what the game needed or required, or what players were kind of not had in a while, or what fit the raid itself. Like, when you start, as soon as you got all that criteria to actually pick rewards, and then you've got, like, to balance the rewards amongst themselves, because you don't want to just pick 6 mage rewards, even though the game kind of needs a bunch of mage stuff. You kind of want to balance that. So you want some mage, some range, some melee, and then it's like, do we want a bunch of armor sets? Maybe it's just one armor set, and then do we want some, like, miscellaneous rewards that are more like that are beneficial for, like, skilling or PvP? Like, you kind of want a good balance of all of them. So that was really hard. But yeah, there's a massive backlog of rewards whenever we want anything else. I don't think we'll struggle with ideas, but coming up with ideas that fit the content and fit the game is a lot harder.
I remember early on, there was an idea you were playing around instead of the variable attack speed for the wand. It was like an attack that, like, you sent out and it came back and damaged enemies in its path or something?
Yeah, boomerang. Yeah, so you had, like, a different attack speed depending on how close you were as the enemy. So if you're really close, obviously the boomerang would come back faster. But if you were really far away, it'd come back a lot slower. But then maybe it does more damage the farther are you away. Like, there was a bunch of weird ideas with it, but it could be cool.
And I remember, like, that idea was, like, it sounded really cool, but then, like, I think you tried playing around with it, it just felt really wrong and weird. And I think part of that is because, like, how animation delayed from where you're running, right? So, like, it feels like it should come back faster, or should come, you know.
It definitely has potential. It's really hard to get it right.
Was there any other, like, extreme outliers when you had all these reward ideas that are, like, even though they might not fit, they just sound really cool on paper, like another one?
There was one I really liked, which was a melee weapon that dealt more damage if you attacked an NPC or a player from behind. So it was like maybe it did 20% more damage. So it basically become best in slot for anything you attack from behind, because you pretty much have to do that to make it relevant. The problem with it is, if you're alone, every single NPC in the game will face you. You can't attack an enemy from behind if you're by yourself. But then you just, like, in Nightmare, the meta would be, okay, the tank stands at the front, everyone else uses this weapon and stands behind. So it's a cool idea, but I don't know if it really works in RuneScape.
Yeah, and I think, like, that's part of the problem with the wand. Like, from my personal opinion, I know some people on the team like it a lot more. I know some people in the community are still really for it. But to me, just, like, I think, like, saw chat's reaction to the boomerang, and the first thought was, oh my god, that sounds cool, and there's no implication of balance there, right? You know, like, in terms of, does this actually work? Is it going to fit into metas? But I think that that's where a 2-tick attack that suddenly has a 4-tick attack after a charge up doesn't have the same cool feeling as, like, Twisted Bow, this, like, really powerful bow that slays magic creatures, and the scythe, this melee weapon that actually gets to cleave like multiple things. If they're big enough, it takes 3 hit splats, right? I actually wonder sometimes how much of it comes down to like the one not being strong enough versus like it's selling a cool fantasy and a reason to use it, and like making a new like having like it's a very specific like purpose, you know, as opposed to just being like this one that's like going to be good everywhere, right? I don't know. These are just my sort of thoughts about this sort of stuff. Because maybe that's completely wrong, and people are just, it's actually too weak, right?
No, I think you're right, Husky. That balance of like how a weapon feels versus how it like actually is impactful is so important. You've had something feel impactful, but then if it's boring in terms of its usage, it's like, nah, no.
And I think that's the thing. Like, anyone who's owned a T-bow before, there's something about like that weapon that just feels really good. Like, whether it's the fact that it just hits high numbers. I think that the T-bow could be like statistically like 10%, 15% less DPS, and it would still feel really good in the places.
It just looks cool as well. Like, that's such a big thing that we've not really got with TOA rewards. Like, they're all placeholder models and animations, right? Like, nothing particularly feels or looks cool because there isn't any visuals to it at all. So it's purely numbers, and then people are just rating numbers against numbers.
Yeah, for sure. And like the feeling when you get to try a scythe for the first time and you take it into Theater of Blood, there's something about that. It changes your gameplay. I remember like when I got it, I had to completely relearn all the tactics, right? Because I was used to on a 4-tick cycle, and like maybe like that's like a variable speed one could do that as well. I don't know.
The XP drops you got from a scythe the first time as well, after you've used blowpipe for like your entire life, and then all of a sudden you get like 600 XP drops. Like, oh my god.
Yeah, so to preface, the rewards will not be staying that purpley pink placeholder color either. They will be changing from that.
Eventually.
Cool. Yeah, eventually, yeah. So we've got a couple of questions we've taken from socials about Tombs of Amascut and the rewards. So the first one is from Kreebel Nekjer 429. Hope I pronounced that right. With a difficulty scale in this raid, how low of an account can I take inside the tombs?
As long as you complete the quest, you should be able to go inside the tomb. If you can complete it, that's a whole nother question. I think the general this question is kind of similar to the second one as well. Like, what would be the minimum gear requirements to partake in the raid? The barrier to entry, I guess, would be similar to Chambers of Xeric, like minimum barrier to entry. But because of the whole invocation system, like it's all over the place, right? Like you might be able to do like the basic version of TOA, like Chambers of Xeric entry level, but then the more invocations you add to unlock actual good GP per hour and unlock different rewards, etc., you might all of a sudden be requiring more and more stats, more and more gear, and it depends on your group as well, right? Because it's not just a purely solo activity. So maybe you can get away with worse gear and worse stats, but obviously your friends can carry you somewhat. Yeah, kind of varies.
Barrier to entry,
I hope
right?
that gives a rough idea. What'd you say?
That's the biggest barrier to entry, right? Finding friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need someone with strong knees and strong backs to make sure they can get you through those raids. So, the next question is from Uncle Big Thumbs. Master level quest, end game raid unlocked. Do you think the requirements should be a little more demanding?
So
I feel like
I saw
this
this
comes up
question
a lot, right?
Yeah, I saw this question ahead of time. I was thinking about it a lot, and like, here's the problem, right? We have master level quests that I think Roving Elves is one of them, but also Sins of the Father is one of them. So you've got this like scale of like master quest tiering just feels all over the place, I think, generally. Whereas like master clues, like the word master, like you're like, oh wow, that's like 90 stats, that's insane, right? And then like master combat achievements is like Inferno, and then like so maybe like the terminology of questing, but then again, like even like our Grandmaster quests are not as hard as like the Inferno, so it's never gonna line up. Do you know what I mean? I think compared to like some of the other master quests, it does have about the right skill requirements, right? I think they might be like, it could maybe be bumped up a little bit, and like that's perfectly valid feedback. You'll just be, hey, can we have slightly higher skill requirements? But I don't think you're ever gonna get something to the point of like 70s, 80s, and 90s, because like I think Song of the Elves is like 70 and like 6 or 7 stats, and it's a Grandmaster, right? And it's probably like up there in one of the harder quests like to do for like an account. So I just think like the band, maybe it's just the word feels wrong. Do you know what I mean?
I also think like requirements don't not necessarily need to directly match the content. So Inferno requires a fire cape. Inferno is a lot harder than fire capes, right? Like imagine if like to do Inferno, to do the next race for TOA, you required an Inferno cape, because imagine that TOA is that difficult, right? And we're like, oh, only people with Inferno capes would be able to do that. It'd feel wrong to gate it behind another really hard piece of content. I'm not saying that's what the player was suggesting, right? But I think just because a content is really, really hard doesn't mean the requirement needs to be really, really hard. I think it should feel appropriate, and it shouldn't feel like a player's kind of gone in like completely out of their depth. But I feel like it's part of the progression to like unlock harder content and then do that content, get better, and then be able to unlock harder content and then do that, get better. It's part of the path.
To me, as long as it's harder than Contact. Is that the one where you fight the Scarab boss? I think it is.
Yeah.
Right, that's not a particularly hard boss, but as long as it's a step up from that, I mean, you still want like what 70 stats for that, maybe?
Yeah.
Ish. Like obviously, like you say that, but then like, you know, Randy's done it on like a level 3 account or something, right? But you know what I mean. Like, I think that as long as it's a step up from that, you're completely fine, right? In terms of difficulty, because I think the quest should be considered as it's only there as a requirement because it's going to explain the story and give you like a lead into the raid, and then it's going to make sense from that. Because one of the goals of TOA is to have a more narrative-driven experience. If anyone has done the rework of A Night at the Theater, I think that's more like akin to like the stuff that we want to start doing with more of our raids, and not just be, hey, here's a big dungeon in the ground with a bunch of monsters, kind of like what Chambers of Zarek was, right? And to have you like more along with understanding what's happening here, how it fits into the game world, and that's really what the purpose of the quest is, right? And following on from the storyline of what happened in Contact, right? You know.
Yeah, exactly. I think you might be right onto something with perception of the word master as well, Husky. Because look at something like master combat achievements and their difficulty compared to like a master level quest. Like, it very varies. So yeah, I think maybe the terminology is something, but it's you know, I think you're right. It is around that master level barrier in terms of questing. I think we've covered this point, but just to re-ask it so you all know. Later console asks, will this be soloable content?
It'll scale from 1 to 8, so it'll scale further than GOB did, at least in both directions. Whether that means you'll be able to solo easily or it'll be efficient or anything like that is a completely different question. But there won't be mechanics that'll just arbitrarily prevent it from being soloable, but difficulty and just sheer complexity might make it just undesirable, right?
Correct me if I'm wrong as well, Arcane, because I know you've worked a lot more in this, and I think the design intention with the invocations is we're not going to balance having all invocations on around being soloable. Like, we'll stop things that are like blatantly like this mechanic needs 2 players to do, right? Like 2 people to stand on 2 plates, 1 person can't do it. But if it's just impossible theoretically to solo at max invocations, that's also probably fine, right?
Yeah.
That's at least my understanding of it. And then like maybe Gear will come out, he'll do it, or like someone will discover a method, or Wooks will just do it because he's Wooks, right? And then like the other people will follow and perfect on the strategies that he found out, right?
I'd be happy if for the first couple of months people just couldn't figure out how to solo it either at all or with a certain amount of invocations on, and then eventually people kind of figure it out and you get these crazy metas that make it actually really interesting. That'd be ideal in my mind. I don't know if we'll hit it, but we'll see.
I mean, yeah, regardless of how hard we actually make it, regardless of group size, someone will try it at the hardest possible way, whether we implement mechanics or they just limit themselves regardless. So, yeah.
Everyone doesn't like my example. You know, pressure plates, we've got pet rocks, you know? We got this. We practiced at DKs.
Cool. So the next question is from X Innocent. What are your thoughts on power creep? Do you think it's a necessary evil, or is it something you guys want to avoid as much as you can?
It's definitely going to happen eventually, and it already kind of has happened multiple times. Tivo and Scythe were incredible forms of power creep. It just didn't feel like it really creeped on anything in a bad way. Is the difference, right? Power creep's fine as long as it doesn't really badly and unnecessarily invalidate other pieces of content. Releasing Bandos 2, like Torva, with like 10 more strength or whatever, does power creep, but does it power creep in a bad way? Maybe yes, maybe no. Subjective. I think Bandos would still have a place in the game, even if that did happen.
See, I've been on the bandwagon of like bring on tier 80 gear and you know the 80 to 85 meta and stuff for a while, right? That's something I've always wanted. I always thought it was an unpopular opinion, and the community seems to be picking it up now. I do agree, like what we said earlier in the stream, like the relevancy of content is important, right? And we already have power creep because you have a rapier now instead of a whip, right? I do wonder, like, because the thing that's like never spoken about as well is that there are always like PvP implications of things. So like, could we come out with a better AGS, right? If you think about it in that regards, right? Well, no, because players have a maximum of like 99 hit points plus like an anglerfish, right? I know people go, oh, well, like, you know, it's kind of like, it's just always a consideration in the back of your head that like that's literally why the other game went the route they did with, you know, changing to Constitution and making how hit points work and having armor. Like, I think that's almost the reason why like Torva existed and had like extra hit points, right? And there is a level as well, especially in PvP, that's like, how much should a max hit be allowed to do? Like a Dark Bow's hard capped at 48, that's 96 hit points. It's still very unlikely because it's spread across 2 hit splats instead of 1. That actually does matter a lot for the max, right? But I do think that I do wonder where we hit the wall with that, or if there's solutions for that, or like, I know that like, Aiza spoke about like, well, what if we just have like PvP only equipment and stuff, and like, I don't know, I'm excited to see what could happen with that, but I think that's the only drawback I can think of like moving up in the tiers, right? Because maybe 80 to 85 doesn't get there, but does like tier 90 equipment do that, right? Like, because imagine like a rapier like can hit like 50s in max strength. So we come out with like another bunch of armor, we come out with another better weapon, and all in all, it's like another like, you know, 15, 16 strength, and you know that's another 4 max hits, and that does make a huge impact in that when it's just like the obvious question might just be then do we need to come out with better food then, right? But the max health is always going to stay the same, and that's like the hard limiter, right? So yeah, these are the things that we think of, but like, or I think of.
So we've got 7 minutes left. Do we want to just rapid fire just get through all these questions?
We can do. I'm happy for that, and then we can show a little bit of UGC if you know, production allows us the time, just a little bit to go over.
That'd be nice to do. I'll practice my M&M rapping now then, I guess, and just go through them all.
I mean, I can read them if you want, Arcane, and then you can go.
I mean, it'd probably be faster if I just do it all. Probably be scope.
Go.
Any insight on how generic loot will differ from other raids? It will share some loot, and it'll have other loot that's probably different. Will death mechanics be similar to either of the previous raids? Is going to be in between both Cox and TOB. So you're going to have most likely some sort of wipe system, but it's not going to be as punishing as TOB with the base level in terms of you wipe once and that's over. What types of players is this raid aimed at? I feel like the quality of rewards make it seem aimed at new players with low stats. Do you have any thoughts on this? We talked a lot about rewards. We're probably going to be changing a lot of them, but generally the raid should be aimed at endgame players. But again, the barrier to entry is going to be lower than TOB, but it's going to scale up higher than TOB. Players can be one-hit in a lot of endgame content from 40% HP. Also, tick eating will make players lose more damage than the armor will give. What is the intended niche from Sorry? A content where you feel like it's safe enough. Will TOA release also feature a lore-based quest to go beside it? Yes, it will. Are you interested in creating a more unique general resource table for Raids 3? Seems like every boss drops 3 big things: herbs, rune ore, and high-tier runes. Something like charged battle staffs or orbs, maybe arrows or dart tips, some things we don't see on many loot tables at all. Variety can go a long way. Yeah, I think we're going to be generally looking at a lot of items, but in essence, herbs, rune ore, and high-tier runes all have a pretty stable value, so I think that's why most people just gravitate towards dropping them. We've been talking a lot about general supplies and resources for drop tables recently. As we learned from the 100% increased accuracy on the blowpipe change, it barely feels more accurate at all. Perhaps the Khopesh could have 100% guaranteed accuracy on the special, much like the Magic Long Bone Dagger type spec. I think having a weapon with 100% guaranteed accuracy is very, very dangerous. Maybe 100% increase isn't enough, especially on the blowpipe, since it's fairly low accuracy in general. But it is roughly just a good number where it feels like, okay, you're probably not going to miss nearly as much. Maybe it needs to be 200%, I don't know. But I don't agree with 100% accurate weapons. Are there going to be item sinks for items that are best in slot but lose or have lost their status after new better items have been introduced? We are looking into item sinks in general on like a bigger scale. Individual rewards, yeah, we still consider them, like Armadillo, Missouri, etc. It does get considered. Will there be a type of way to get supplies mid-run TOA run, similar to TOB and Chambers of Zareth? Yes. Osmondson's Fang is a great idea for a new weapon, but I think it could be improved upon. I have 2 suggestions. Allow the weapon to have a 1-tile increased attack distance similar to halberds whilst on defensive style. Secondly, allow the weapon to deal full damage to Corp. I agree with the second one, I think that'd be really cool, and we'd probably pull it as a second option on the Fang itself. So do you want the Fang, or do you want the Fang, and will it deal full damage to Corp? For the first point about the increased attack distance similar to halberds, I would just really like to introduce a 4-tick halberd at some point. It's actually a good main weapon. I think that'd be a cool idea. Will the dodge from low life have a unique animation or hit splat? It has a hit splat. You'll see that on Wednesday. Did you guys consider making a low life scaling effect over a larger range of health, more than just a hard cutoff of 40%? We did consider it. It's incredibly hard to balance. You look at Darox, its max hit is wildly all over the place. At the end of the day, there's going to be a threshold where it's either good or it's bad, and that threshold is kind of what we saw at. There could be leeway there, right? It could scale between like 20 to 50, but then it gets complicated to the point where it just feels weird and it's complicated and you don't really understand how it works. Having a clear cutoff point is quite nice. We have plenty of content that is forced solo, whilst most, if not all, group content is possible solo. When may we see unique mechanics in endgame content requiring more than one person for completion? I would say TOB had a very strong emphasis on rooms that required more than one person. Obviously, it has been soloed, but I think there are definitely mechanics in there that heavily encourage other people to be involved. I don't like bosses that force you to have more people, but I like it where the efficiency is with more people. So I think, say TOB did scale down to solo, I think it'd be great if TOB was still more efficient to get GP, etc. loot in 3-man. But I think solo being an option is only a benefit. But I do agree with the sentiment of like, oh, it's cool when you have to require other people. Next might be the first one. Thoughts on making artifacts you loot from Pyramid Plunder more useful in TOA or in the updated new area to make thieving more rewarding and tie in old content? I have not thought about this in the slightest, but I imagine we're probably going to have a teleport, a new teleport on something, like maybe the Pharaoh Scepter or something like that. Depends what's appropriate. Maybe it'll be a diary reward. Maybe it'll be like a new item like Zarek's Talisman or the amulet from the TOB quest. But there's going to be something there just to get to the raid a bit quicker. Twitch chat questions. Will there be an animation when the dodge procs? There was a hit splat for it. I said that earlier. Thoughts on adding a divine clone to raids 3? It's not too much power creep. With all the new PVM coming out and combat achievements, the power increase now has a real use. A divine clone. I assume this means the offhand. I mean, we've pulled the offhand twice. And it's failed. Maybe it was 3 times. I don't know. I don't think the divine's nearly as useful in our game. I think prayer is a lot more useful as a resource. I think the Ellie is very, very powerful. But I don't know, maybe one day. One of the things players liked about dungeoneering in RS2 was that every skill had a use. Can we expect for a variety of non-combat skills to have important uses in Raid 3? We're not going to have a heavy emphasis on skills. There will be an emphasis on skills, more than TOB, but most likely less than Chambers of Zarek. Have you guys considered renaming TOA to have a funny acronym? No. Alright, we can do UGC now.
Bravo,
It's going to be
bravo.
TOC, right? TOB, TOA, TOC.
Well, yeah, I think next time, Arcane, you can take this. You can take the whole live stream, and you're just gonna have to like completely blitz through it as fast as you can.
Do an entire hour stream of like 200 questions, and I'll just go through them all.
Yeah, no breath,
think
no
you're
breath
talking-
though.
I think your talking time the stream must be at like 40 minutes because it was a 25-minute ramble at the start or something, right? You know.
Awesome, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you very much for that, Arcane. Very, very clear and concise answering. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Cool. So we go on. We will finish with some UGC. The first one is called Starry Night Lumbee by AI generated art. Which, if it is AI generated art, it's pretty dope. Yeah, I'd have that on my wall. Awesome.
It's pretty cool.
Kind of trippy.
It is. It is. I kind of like that though. The next bit of UGC we've got is called Varax Helm from Nickel the Grizzly Bear. Is that like head sized? Is that like full head? Like I don't know if my head could fit in that, but
I'm not sure. There's a head in the background there. I'm not sure if the ratio's right though. I reckon
yeah.
you could wear that.
Yeah, maybe. They might have to make like a bigger size one for mine though. It's the forehead that takes up most of the space, I think. The next one we've got is the OSRS plate from a user called Thesaurus. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. And the next one, which I definitely felt when started Group Iron Man, is the when the Imp Catcher Magic XP hits. Felt good. I imagine all of my Group Iron Man team felt like that, as I was the resident Imp Hunter at the start. But we've got enough now. We've got enough now. So it's all good. It does feel different though, getting the beads for everyone else, which is quite nice. It's like a nice motivator.
Like painful, you mean? Like...
Yes. Didn't find it relaxing at all. And the final bit we've got is called Aberrant Spectre by Daniel Troikai. That is very cool.
Aberrant Spectres have hands. Oh god.
Oh. I would have that hanging up with the Lumbee pick. I think it's got similar vibes. Awesome. And finally, we've got a quick reminder of what our own artists have been working on for the Tombs of Amascut. Very cool ideation sketches for you all. You can see them in the most recent blog. There's a full-size image if you click on the picture. So yeah, have a look, take a look, see what they've come up with. And just before I go through the announcements again, Husky, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I just want a small recap because we're at the end of the stream now. But I think Sween was on at the start. He spoke a lot about some of the Dead Man stuff and where we're at with that. I'm not going to try and copy his words, but if you're interested in that, go check out the VOD. It's at the start. He also talked on the whole PvP changes and with no set deadline, and but we are working on them, and we'd like to bundle them all at once, so is progress and stuff. Again, check it out for that. But I see people talking about PvP and Deadman and stuff in the chat. Just a reminder, it was addressed. We're not ignoring it. It's just Sween has a way with words, and I'm going to miss him for that, for sure. And then lastly, as Arcane said a few times, like, this is only round 2 of the blogs. If they literally don't work, if the rewards don't work and you're not happy with them, we'll continue to rework them till they do, right? Or completely scrap them if need be. So continue to give feedback. Check out the beta, please. And yeah, we want you to have awesome rewards for this raid.
Thank you very much, Husky. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And Sween does have a way with words. We're gonna miss him a lot on this team, especially like with me working so closely with him. It's been an absolute pleasure. We will aim to keep you updated, like as a general update in the Gazettes each month. Now that they're back, so keep an eye on them as well. There was a little bit about various updates in this month's one, and the same thing will be happening with next month's and the months after that. So just keep an eye on the Gazettes as well. So to round off, I will go through the announcements again. ! Group Iron Man. Group Iron Man has now launched and it's in its 2nd week. We've made some initial hotfixes and we're also working on some further improvements following your feedback. Find out what we're doing with regards to group storage space, saving from group storage, a group chat channel, and more. And we're even exploring the possibility of a shared hall. So look at what we're working on in this week's Game Update news post. Exclamation mark raids free rewards. The Tombs of Amascut is Old School's third raid. In this, our latest blog, we've updated them and made some changes to the rewards following your feedback. You also get to try them out yourself in a beta coming on October 20th. So let us know what you think of the changes, and please take part in that beta. It will be a good experience. Have a reread of the blog if you've read it already, and if not, head over to that now. And finally, next, we will have some more details about the rewards you can expect from next tomorrow. Hopefully, it will be just after midday, and we'll be able to collect them for you and go through your feedback. So please hang tight before we release the blog. They will also be able to be tested in the beta coming on October 20th. So mark that in your calendars. Content shouldn't be limited. You'll have some other items to go with it, and you'll get to test all the rewards. So that is everything. Thank you to everyone who's been a part of the stream. Mod Sween, Mod Arcane, Mod Husky, Mod Spear behind the scenes, and Mod Light as well on chat, and all the other J mods in the chat. Also, I'd like to thank everyone for watching. Any last words from you guys?
And thanks to Mod Sarnie for hosting. Thank everyone but yourself, man.
Oh, I don't need the thanks. Thank you, Husky. I appreciate it.
As always, my Twitter and Discord DMs are open if you do want to talk more TOA, and the next blog is going out tomorrow, so I expect you want to talk even more. But yeah, they're always open. I'm happy to chat, design items and stuff.
Yes, please follow all the J mods that have been featured and all the other ones. All of us. Just follow us all. It's a good way to start conversation with us. Have a chat and let us know what you're thinking. With that being said, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next week in the next stream. Goodbye.